Good morning. This morning, talking about 3 lessons that I learned, or things that I learned this week. The first two are going to be about this networking group that I joined, and then the last one's going to be about some travel stuff. So, first thing, I joined this networking group this week, and I think the lesson that I learned was that surrounding yourself with a group of like-minded individuals that also want to grow, progress, improve themselves, that want a better life, all that kind of stuff, is transformational. And I need to figure out how to actually convey this properly, because I know if my past self were watching this video, he would nod and agree and say, oh yeah, you should surround yourself with like-minded individuals. But he wouldn't actually do it, you know? And so I still need to figure out what the unlock is, because I actually feel like a different person in the last week. Just the amount of, we have this WhatsApp group, and the number of messages is insane. Everybody is super active and throwing questions in there, helping each other out. It's been crazy, and I've found that I've started substituting, watching. Basically, my free time has been spent reading the group chat messages, which is probably a lot more productive and useful than anything else I'd be spending my free time doing. So the other thing is, and I don't think this is going to be my second lesson that I learned, but something I noticed is that I personally am a lot more active in this group than I was expecting. Like I said, I'm reading a lot of the messages, throwing questions in there that I have, trying to contribute. And it's interesting, because I feel like in the past I've tended to kind of be a lurker, just kind of sitting on the sidelines, reading and not really actively contributing. And so maybe it's the fact that the barrier to entry was a large sum of money, or maybe it's because the guys in there are actually where I want to be, similar mindset. But maybe it's a combination of both. But yeah, I feel different, and it's that even that has been interesting to note. It's whoa, I've been just slinging DMs to people, hey, what's up? Oh, great to meet you. I'd love to hear more about your experience. That's something that my past self would never do. So even just that, yeah. So first lesson, surrounding yourself with a network is transformational. And I think the second lesson that I learned, I still have to kind of parse this out, but thinking about what actually made me make the decision to join. And I think it was probably two things. One is, maybe three things. First thing was, I I wrote down all of the pros and cons or upsides and downsides to joining or not joining. And then, so like have everything out in writing on paper. So it's not emotional anymore. That was one thing I noticed. It's like after I watched the first video, it was I felt very emotional. It's like, oh my God, this is actually like great. Should I do it? And so I put everything out on writing, and then I could objectively analyze the words on the paper rather than how I feel about it. And then what else did I do? I looked at the upside, downsides, and I did what's the worst case scenario? Like what's the best case scenario and what's the worst case scenario? Like what is the absolute worst case scenario? And then on the back of that, am I okay still in that situation? And that was helpful, knowing like, okay, if all shit hits the fan, like this is what's gonna happen. Am I still okay? Yes. And then so writing it out on in writing, worst case scenario. And then the third was like actually making the decision. I was still very like wavering back and forth between yes and no. I was like, oh, I think I should do it. But like it was just fear. I was just scared to make the decision. And so I think the other big tell for me was I have not been that intrigued or not actually pulled the trigger on any other communities. And the fact that this one actually intrigued me that much that I was doing research into it, I was like, that's kind of a sign. And then the last thing was, I think sometimes you just have to either turn the brain off and go with it, or use the frame of like, just take the risk. Just do it. Take the risk, accept the risk, and just punch in the credit card number. So that's kind of the second lesson I wanted to learn. This is very beautiful sunrise. Wow. The second lesson I wanted to get across was like, what was it that actually made me make the decision to go from like, wow, this is cool, to like actually doing it? Because there was a lot of back and forth in my mind. And so writing it out on paper, worst case scenario, then just accepting, like, just take the risk and turn the brain off, and focus on the upside. That's the other thing. It's like, stop looking at the downsides of this. Like you already know that some of the downsides are mitigated. Look at the upside. Like, look at what could be in 1 year. And then, so that's that. Third lesson I learned this week, or thing I learned, was to outsource my travel recommendations. I laugh because, I don't know, I think it's funny. It's funny to outsource everything. How did I learn this? I was talking with this woman in the co-working space 2 days ago, and there was this other woman women there too, and we were all talking about travels and stories and stuff. And she was headed to Georgetown, and she was asking me for any particular recommendations, and she was giving me recommendations as well. And I realized that in combination with the only reason I'm here is because I met somebody in Kuala Lumpur. They said they were coming here, and then I saw their Instagram story about the hostel they were staying in, and it was like one image of the beach, and I was like, oh, that looks cool, let's go. The flight was $24, and the only reason I went to Kuala Lumpur was because I saw one YouTube video, but I met a guy in Bali that was like, yo, Kuala Lumpur is like really underrated. And so I went. And one of the best memories from my Europe trip, best because it's the one where I broke my toe, is Hammermoose Elm in the Austrian Alps. And the only reason I was there is because I met a girl in Lisbon, Portugal, and she was like, oh, you have to go here, it's like amazing, it's this like lodge up in the, you have to hike to it, and they like, it's super local. And I was like, that sounds great, I'm gonna put it on my map. And then when I was in Austria, I was like, oh yeah, there's this thing that girl recommended, and I went there, and it was amazing. Like, memories. I have the memory, and that's all that matters. So I don't know, I think I'm gonna start leaning into this a little bit more, and whenever I meet people, try to start asking for recommendations, because it just cuts through. Like, literally the last thing that I want to do is spend my time reading through travel blog articles about, the top places to go in Malaysia. And like, that for me just sounds like a waste of my time, because that is the exact situation that leads to the decision fatigue that I get, that I don't like. And doing that, leads to decision fatigue, which leads to me just not taking action. So I would rather not know and just pick, an okay or good recommendation that I get directly from somebody than have to sift through all of these articles. My time is better spent elsewhere. So anyway, that's what I got for you today. Joining a network, what it takes to make the decision, and outsourcing travel recommendations. See you tomorrow.